Hello, everyone.
Hi, Tarek.
Hey.
Well, my audio is not working. Yes, now it's working. Okay.
I can hear you.
Thank you.
Joel, do you have slides?
2 slides as PDF. Do you want me
Can
to email you?
Maybe Tarek, but yeah.
Yeah, what I would like is to upload them so that we can share
Okay.
them. And
I'll
otherwise, you
email
have
them
to
to
share
both of
them.
you right now. No problem.
Yeah, thank you.
There. There. Sent the PDF.
Okay, so you sent it to me, right? Just so I understand.
I sent it to Tarek and Loa.
Oh,
Oh,
okay. I'll do that. I'll upload them. No problem.
I figured
Thank
I'd
you.
send it to both of you and you could figure it out.
Okay.
Let me make sure I sent it to the right address for you.
I think I got it.
Yeah, I sent it to tsad.net@gmail.com.
Got it. Okay. Let me upload it now.
Thank you.
No problem.
I figured they'd need to get uploaded at some point. I don't care. Doing it first
Yeah.
works fine for me. And then you guys can drive the share. Works.
Yeah, the interim has a different page for uploading, so not easy to find.
No problem.
So should I title it as multiple ISD discussion? M&A and pushing.
You can call it whatever you want. I called it M&A and pushing because that's the focus of my particular 2 slides. But
Okay, then I'll call it.
and yes, the point is the interaction when you're pushing labels with the presence of other of ISDs in the stack. But it's a
Okay.
generic
I
generic
need to
case.
refresh the slides. Refresh.
And
Close.
if at all possible, I would hope to depart at 11 o'clock because I have another call coming then.
And what time do you have now? 10 o'clock?
10 o'clock now.
Okay, yeah.
From what you guys said about the agenda, it felt like an hour should be fine. And if we're really engaged in a useful discussion, I can stay and just send my regrets to the other call. But I prefer to be there because if something comes up, I need to vote there.
Okay.
Would Mr. Unduk please identify themselves?
Yeah, I was going to ask also. We have a participant that it starts with 40 and own Duke.
I guess I would like to raise an issue. I have an issue with anonymous participants.
Yeah, that's not what we expect. So
And, I mean, the tooling is supposed to require a data tracker login, which means he made a data tracker login, but that doesn't tell us anything about who he actually is.
and if you're looking at that profile, it doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
It says 0 RC, 0 internet drafts, 0 expired draft, and nothing more.
Yeah. And if he wants to speak up and identify himself, that's fine. Otherwise, we probably need to do something. Because otherwise, this actually undermines certain important principles.
So Tarek, do you know what we can do?
Yes, so I'm looking for what we can do with Meet Echo, and as chairs, I don't think we can bump out anyone. We don't have that privilege, or if we should to begin with. But maybe we can ask for Meet Echo support on that.
Hal,
So,
you can send something to action@ietf.org, but it'll probably take a little while.
I thought
Yeah.
there was a Meet Echo help somewhere, but
Yeah.
maybe even slower.
Setting, yeah. Let's see that Meet Echo help.
I think there's nothing from the Meet Echo menu.
Right.
Share screen, send video.
I can mute them. I can,
Yeah.
you know.
Mute, but that's it.
So, given that it's public, the answer is probably force mute, and then he's effectively not participating. I mean, the session is being recorded, folks can listen all the time. But if he tries to speak up, just force mute him.
Makes sense for me.
That's effectively giving him no more participation than he would have by viewing the recording, which anybody may do, and even anonymously.
Yeah.
So we should probably get started. Although
Yeah,
I don't see Stuart.
I was gonna say that we have 10 attendees right now and many missing in action, including Stuart. I know that you have time constraint and we should get started. So let me just go through the administration slides, and by then hopefully we'll have more people joined. That's my plan. Let me know if anybody disagrees.
Yeah, I have a question from indirectly from Ji Dong. Ji says that he didn't receive a meeting announcement. Is that a problem for anyone else?
It was in the calendar. That means it was properly announced.
I thought I sent it out yesterday.
I don't think I remember seeing. I don't
Yeah,
remember. I may have forgotten. I don't remember seeing an email from you with the agenda, other than the request for slides.
yeah. I didn't get the request, so I assume that if it's not explicitly canceled, that it's on. So
So I think you didn't send out an announcement of the agenda for today.
I did not get an
But
announcement.
Okay, so that something happened. I checked my outbox and see what happened. No, it's probably my mistake. Okay, so what should we do about that? You just say that it's not, if it's not canceled, it's on, and then go ahead.
yeah,
Okay.
and the one presenter who's missing certainly knew that you were planning to have a call today.
Yeah.
Tarek seems to have fallen offline.
It was also listed on the MPLS meetings on the data tracker, which is when I ended up having to go search for it.
That's how I find it all the time.
Message from Tarek. He has a power out.
Oh, well, that will make life a little awkward.
Yeah. And I tried to send a message to Stuart, and I don't get a reply. He says he will try to use, Tarek says he will try to use his phone to log in.
That should work.
As long
He may need you to drive the sharing, but
yeah. So let's see. This one is. If anyone wondering what I'm doing, I'm just checking what happened to my mail. I think I sent yesterday. I can't find it, so I'm probably missed one way or another. Okay. But anyhow, I uploaded the new agenda and the slides, so we should be ready to go. If Tarek comes back on, he will probably run the rest of the meeting, but I don't feel prepared to do the action items. And see if I can. Presentation. Where do I share the?
I can share the agenda. I mean,
Okay, good.
hang on.
It's there. Okay. So as usual, we get started, and I think when we get to past the share slide, we jump directly to what to hear what Greg and Tony has to say, and then try to get Stuart back online. So next slide, please.
Yeah.
And that's the note. Well, shouldn't be any surprises for anyone. You should be familiar with the content of that slide. So go ahead. The previous slides has that one, the administrative slide. So if anyone that can participate in taking notes, please do so. I think this is updated. Yes, it is. Okay, next slide. The agenda is fairly simple. We are doing one agenda bashing. We postpone the action items until Tarek gets back. we have a discussion on multiple ISD instances in the packet. And if Yi is ready to go, we have a discussion on ISD limitation analysis. Yi, if you hear this, can you send your slides to, I think, Nick? You can upload them. And Nick can upload them. If you're trying, Nick, if you're trying to talk, you're muted.
Yeah. That's it. Oh, he can share. I mean, that should also work. Yeah.
Okay, good.
And in fact, I have 1 minute. There's already one.
Hi, Loan, everyone. I am back, but
Okay.
I'm on my hotspot iPhone, so yeah, I might drop out. Still, I have power outage. I'm not sure what's going on in the neighborhood. So it's
Good
good
luck.
that you continue sharing.
Okay.
But I can go through the action items that I have because I
Oh,
saw
okay.
you.
Okay,
browse
good.
through. Okay. We have 3 open action items. I'm going to go through them and update them offline while I present them. The first one is the investigation of intersection of any PSD with existing MPLS features. The owner of this action item is the working group, and we wanted proposals to solicit proposals on how to tackle that. The presence of M&A PSD with existing MPLS features. We didn't have any update last week, so I'm hoping we have something this week, or we can postpone for next week as well. Okay, I guess no one has an update on this. So the second action item, it's an open action item, and we have a presentation will be done by Greg on DetNet intersection with M&A, and that's slated for July the 6th. And
That will happen.
Okay. All right. And the last open action item we have is a discussion on the agenda today, the presence of multiple ISDs. And specifically, we're tracking any updates that are needed in the working group documents that we have. So we have assigned this action item to the owners of the working group IDs or drafts. But there will be a discussion on the need for such updates today. So I won't update that now, but maybe I'll wait for the discussion to happen. But feel free to, let me know if you want to track anything on that. Okay, and I didn't see anyone come to the queue or raise their hand. And that was the last action item. And back to you, Lo, I think, or Nick, whoever was sharing the.
I was trying to do my best, but we actually ready to get. We need the. I need the slides. Oh, I need the. We need to share the slides.
Yeah, I think anyone can share. Any one of us can share the slides. I can share it again.
No, I think Nick is doing it. It's coming up.
Okay. Nick,
No?
Nick, are you doing it? I was gonna do it, but
I don't have the slides yet. So if you have them,
Okay, Terry, can you upload
them,
the slides?
yeah, I will do that. In terms of shares. So we're
it might
talking
take a while with our mail server. Sorry. Okay. Oh, those slides. Yeah, I thought
we're talking about
No, I meant Joel's slides.
Yeah.
Joel. Okay, one second. So Nick, Joel's slides are also uploaded. So
Yeah. That's here.
This is it. 2 slides I have.
Are you sharing or am I sharing?
Yep, you're sharing my slides. Thank you.
Okay.
So, Joel, I think you can go.
Okay, so I've only got 2 slides here. The request from the chairs was quickly summarize what I'd sent to the list. So that's what I'm going to try to do. The situation that caught my eye is that the current protocol draft doesn't deal with what has to happen when an M&A aware node is pushing labels onto a stack that has at least one hop by hop M&A substack. And presumably that's visible to it within the visible region. Otherwise, we don't know what it'll do. Similarly, the reason I say an M&A aware node is we can't specify what an M&A unaware node, a legacy node, whatever you want to call it, does, because it does whatever it already does. But an aware node needs to comply with the drafts and behave in a way that allows other things to comply with the drafts. And for example, the draft says that a node needs to examine only one hop by hop M&A substack and only needs to look in its visible region for things unless it gets an indication it should do otherwise. So that's what we're trying to address. Next slide. So what does it have to do? If a node is pushing labels onto the stack and it isn't itself adding a hop by hop M&A substack, then it has to check for the case of it's pushing the hop by hop substack outside of the visible label range. If it does that, in order to preserve visibility, it has to copy the hop by hop M&A substack into the stuff it's pushing on in such a way that it is visible. Fairly straightforward. You got to do this. It's actually implicit, for example, in entropy labels already that you got to do that. The more interesting case is if the node that's pushing on labels is pushing on a hop by hop M&A substack. If it's doing that and it sees one coming in, it has to copy the content, doesn't need to copy the M&A indicator label, but the content of that substack into its own substack, so that the result is that a later examining node only has to examine one hop by hop M&A substack. There is a buried corner case implicit in that. What if there's some sort of weird conflict between the two actions? I don't think we need to say anything about that. I think we just say it's the job of the node to sort it out any way it thinks appropriate. This is minimal behavior. If an action wants to define additional behaviors, the action can define whatever it wants, and we can debate whether that's the right thing or the wrong thing to do. But independent of any specific actions, this is a general requirement for pushing on label stacks, and particularly pushing on label stacks that include a hop by hop M&A substack. That's what I said to the list. That's what I'm saying now. Questions are welcome.
Jaren, go ahead. Yeah, we have one question.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. Do we really need to copy the content, or just indicating that there is an hop by hop underneath?
No, you have to copy the content because the rules in the stacks we could make up an action to try to work around this that says you must dive deeper into the stack, but we're trying to keep the actions visible in the visible region of the stack. So my proposal was you copy the content. I guess we could define an action that you have to add to your stack that says there's another hop by hop M&A substack you must examine, go look for it. That would be an alternative way to solve the problem.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. No, just an indication.
It would also produce the right result, but it could well result in a node having to go diving through the whole label stack, which I thought we were trying to avoid.
But the thing is that, Joe, if you have a multiple hop by hop options, right? So then we need to copy all the hop by options.
No, you only
to
have
the
to copy the next
right?
one. This is the trick. You only have to copy the one you can see because by definition, it has a copy of any lower ones. And usually they're all identical, so there's only one you need to examine. It's recursive. The recursion automatically takes care of the other problems.
So no, I mean, like if you have two different opcodes, hop by hop opcodes encoded, right? So
Yeah, they
then
have to
actually,
both be in that parent. You have to copy the
exactly.
opcodes from the second one into the first one. But you don't have to go looking for a third one to copy because by definition, the second one had the same content, included the content. The higher ones are a superset of the lower ones. So you only have to do it once and it just works. If you're worried about label stack depth, then the other alternative is to create a difficulty where you have to go diving looking for things. And so I was trying to avoid that, in particular in the very common case where the only thing being pushed on is one new action. It seemed to make much more sense to copy the stuff up than to tell people you have to go looking past your visible data, your visible depth. But I will grant you, defining an action that says go look for the next one would also solve the problem.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Matthew?
All right. And Matthew? Matthew dropped. Oh.
Clarification.
Still
Is there an assumption here? Maybe I missed it, but there's an assumption here, right? You're doing like a hierarchical LSP. So you've got a label stack coming in with hop by hop MNA in it, and then you're pushing another label stack on top of that, some intermediate LER, and then you're copying the hop by hop MNA from that into that outer LSP. Are we assuming here? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm copying the behavior here is to copy the stuff that came in into the stuff you pushed on, because by assumption, by the definition of a hop by hop LSP, a hop by hop MNA substack, it's supposed to apply to all LSRs along the way. So you can't mask it. Now, if somebody wants to define an action that says don't do that, they can define an action, but this is the default required behavior.
So I think we just need to be really careful on our definition of hop by hop here, because it's not an LSR. So it's not an LSR for that. That tunneling LSP is not an LSR for the LSP that you're carrying. It's only an LSR at the edges of it. So if you think of an LDP over RSVP case, or a BGPLU over RSVP or over SRTE type of case, it's only visible where you swap that in a label. So I'm not sure that the hop by hop, that the LSRs for that outer tunnel are actually hops for the inner LSP.
I guess that depends on the tunnel mode, but the way I understood things, they were. Otherwise, you'd get a weird. Otherwise, for example, if you push NFFRR on, and then something else pushes some other action on, you would be masking the no further reroute.
Well, maybe that's okay. Maybe that's okay, because
I mean,
yeah, I mean, I agree, but I think we have to think really carefully about this, because it means that the ultimate head end of that inner LSP the ingress LER has to know the capability of every single LSP, every single LSR in every downstream domain that it may be tunneled over.
no, it doesn't have to know the capabilities, because if an LSR doesn't understand an action, it ignores it. So there's no problem with if there are LSRs that don't understand the action that the original head end put on. We don't get a break from that. The question is, if we assume it's tunnel mode, one could argue, and I think you are arguing, that the original MNA substack is not intended to apply to the inner tunnel. That's not how I read what we were doing, but because clearly there are multiple cases where it is intended to apply, and we don't have any way of knowing the difference between the various modes of these tunnels, because if we're doing it this way, if we're the kinds of things we're doing, we don't have indications of pipe mode, short pipe mode, tunnel mode. So I had assumed we had to assume it applied. You raise an interesting question, Matthew. Should we assume it doesn't apply? But I think that would break an awful lot of things.
I mean, I agree with you for the no further fast food route case where you push a fast food route label. Of course, it makes sense, but I think it's a kind of case by case basis as to whether or not it applies.
Well,
and obviously,
it better not
the
be case
LER
by case.
doing this
So
knows.
sorry, I should have
Sorry.
let you finish. I really hope
Sorry.
it's not case by case, because that's a nightmare. And for example, given that this is all within one domain, we're not, MPLS doesn't run interdomain. Well, MPLS can be interdomain, but that's a different case. The general case is this is all within one domain. And for example, if you're doing IOAM in an intra-domain case, if somebody pushes some labels in the middle of the domain, for example, to do a reroute, you would want the IOAM to be collecting data, preferably by direct export, from the rerouted path so that you get reported, this is the actual path it took, not the one you think it took. And so there seemed to be it seems like the default case is you have to copy it up, and we have to treat it as visible. But you raise an interesting question, and some further analysis is probably needed by somebody who knows all the modes better than I do.
Yeah, I think to say doesn't run into domain. I mean, I agree. You wouldn't, it's not that common to have, say, an end-to-end RSVP LSP across multiple domains, but the kind of principle of being able to chop things up into domains and have tunnels across those domains and then have BGP or LDP labels within those tunnels, that's very commonly deployed. So
yep, that's why I corrected what I was saying. That's but at least in the intra-domain tunnel case, you would normally expect the hop-by-hop labels, hop-by-hop actions to apply to the thing, and we have no good way to distinguish them. I mean, creating two different cases, saying at a domain boundary you don't copy, and at a internal boundary you do copy, frightens me.
well, it's just a local policy decision, isn't it? I think it's not a.
Yeah, but I hate having local policy decisions that require different behavior by routers, because that complicates implementation and complicates diagnosis, and you don't know what's going on. So I really prefer getting a stable decision that is where alternative behaviors are indicated by things in the actions themselves. But that's just my opinion, but as currently written, the current draft doesn't talk about this case. The clear thing is we have to describe what we want to have happen. This is what I thought we had. You do raise an interesting question about the modes of the tunnels.
Okay, thanks.
All right. And Jimmy, if you can hear me, go ahead. Jimmy, if you can hear me, go ahead.
Hello?
I guess you can hear me.
Okay. You hear me now?
Yeah.
Hi. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for this analysis. Actually, I think this is something missing in the current existing document. I think this is maybe one option of the behaviors, but I'm not sure this should be the default one. Actually, for different cases as just discussed with Matthew, maybe different behaviors will be required. Like in this case, Joe mentioned that a copy of the content of this, the next hop-by-hop MNA should be copied. But in some other cases, maybe the newly added information in the new hop-by-hop MNA should be added to the next or maybe every hop-by-hop MNA existing in the label stack. So I'm not sure whether we can choose one as a default or we should document all the basic behaviors in the document,
No, okay. That
all the
case I
option
thought about.
behaviors.
If there, that's why I said if there's an action that wants to cause a different behavior, that is specific to the action. This is the default required behavior in the absence of an overriding action. I do not want to have some nodes deciding they have to copy and some nodes deciding they should be inserting things into other M&A substacks. That, if you want that differentiation, that is clearly triggered by some specific action, and that action should define that behavior, not the default base. Matthew's case is a different point. His point is that independent of the actions, there may be a situation where we need to do something different, and that requires more analysis. I really hope it turns out not to be the case, but I can't tell, and I'm not going to try to, I certainly am not going to assert that he's wrong because he raises a valid case. But in terms of if you have some specific action that requires copying it down, that's the action that defines that, not having a knob that you have to implement so that all routers have to implement that, even if they don't implement the specific action that might require that. We should be aiming to avoid creating multiple choices for how actions behave and how LSRs behave, because every time we introduce a choice, we complicate the test, the interoperability, we complicate the testing, and we complicate the implementation. So we want to avoid choices. That's the IETF preference. That's one of the historic distinctions between the IETF and the ITUT. If there are cases where we must, then we do have to allow choices, and that's why I need more time to think about Matthew's case. But having an action that causes you to copy things into other substacks, well, I want to see the proposed action, and then we can debate whether we agree that's what it should do. But if it's needed, it should be in the description of the action, not having descriptions of multiple different required behaviors where the operator has to configure it. That's a recipe for failure.
Yeah, for me, I agree that for each specific application, we should avoid the different options or behaviors. But if we already observe the possibility of different use cases which require different behaviors, maybe in the base document, we should make people aware that this is all the required behaviors to make this mechanism work as a complete solution before we, instead of when we introduce a new application and we need to update this base document, right?
And we don't, but I disagree. Until we have an action defined that requires a different behavior, there is no point in describing a different behavior. And anybody who cares about that action will read that action and know they have to implement it. We are not going to require implementers to implement behaviors for which there is no use case. So it's until the action is defined that causes things to get copied into other substacks, there's no need to describe it. And when the action is defined, that action describes it. And then if we adopt that as a working group thing and then we publish it, folks who implement it will do it. But there is no expectation that every router is required to implement every action. That was part of Matthew's point. I don't believe that causes an interoperability problem for this, but it's very clear that we expect things to not be implemented by every node.
Yeah, I think last time Stuart mentioned a case which is to indicate no further fast reroute.
And I asked him
path,
not no
to
further
to the merge point.
He asked, he described a case that is not the same as the currently described no further fast reroute. I called it stop reroute, but you could call it whatever you want, but it's a different behavior. We're going to need two different actions, one for the current thing, one for what Stuart's, when Stuart writes up a description. I'm not going to attempt to read his mind about why the draft he points to requires it. When there's a write-up of an action that does make sure nobody anywhere on the path does reroute even after the merge point, he can write it up. We can debate it. If it gets defined, it gets agreed by the working group, it gets agreed by the working group. doesn't change anything. The base behavior we have to have for interoperability has to be there.
Okay, I see Stuart
I'm going to run
joined.
out of
Maybe
time
he
before
can
we
give
get
more
through.
details. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jimmy. We have Tony coming up next.
Tony, you're up.
Yeah, there is a bit of a delay between clicking on the button and
Hello?
getting the. Yeah.
Hello.
Hello. Sorry, Meet Echo is not letting me turn my mic on. So I would like to take issue with something Joel said about what happens when we're inserting an action into a label stack that has hop by hop. When we are inserting new actions, it very much depends on what the semantics of the new action are. If the semantics that we are inserting has applicability throughout the length of the label stack, then the node that is doing the insertion is going to have to amend all of the hop by hop headers throughout the label stack. And in fact, in the general case, the point is you have to amend all of the hop by hop headers that you can find that cover the length of the semantics that you want for that action. Can we agree on that?
No. Two disagreements. First, I think there's only two meaningful bounds, because a node inserting things isn't going to know the significance of the various nodes in the middle of the label stack. Either it applies for the length until the thing it's inserting gets popped, which is the normal case, or it applies to the whole thing. I don't want to create hypotheses for something else. And what I said was, if you want to define an action that requires you to copy that action, not the whole stack, but that action into the other label stack, other substacks in the label stack, define that in that action. And that is separate from this required behavior. Currently, we have no defined actions which require that. If we do define some, then we'll define them.
I got lost in that somewhere. Let's take a specific case. Suppose we have a label stack that has a slice identifier in it. Okay. And somewhere along the path, we decide we want to add entropy. How is that not going to end up affecting the entire label stack?
Because the originator didn't think it needed entropy. So only over the scope over which the pushed labels are being defined does this node really have control, and it's defining that it wants to add entropy over that scope. That's fine, it's privilege, but I would not assume that by default it has to go find all the other label substacks and add entropy to them. And worse, figure out if they already have entropy and see decide what it does with the entropy that it already has, if it has it. That doesn't seem to match my understanding of what it means for a node to be pushing on a set of labels.
Okay, well, how about the reverse case? It has entropy and we're pushing on a slice identifier.
The slice identifier only applies over the scope over which we're pushing it. There may not be an NRP, a slice, to be bound to beyond that. It only knows the scope over which it's directing the traffic. If it wants to direct the traffic over a network resource partition over the part it has charge of because it pushed those labels on, it does so. But it was if the packet was supposed to be directed to a network resource partition over the whole domain, then the entry should have done that. It's not, some other node shouldn't be trying to fix that. particularly because, again, you'd get into, wait a minute, what if it has, you end up with 2 NRPs then, NRP identifiers then? That would be really confusing. You can't
Okay, well,
you can't change the one the domain picked.
I will agree to disagree. Thank you.
Yep, and the list can discuss it.
Okay, thank you. I'm next, so I'm going to go ahead. Last time when we presented the bypass, adding an action, we said we could do it in 2 ways. One is adding a new ISD substack, and the other was to amend the existing one, existing hop by hop ISD MNA substack. So the latter case in your slide, there is an existing hop by hop MNA. So can we amend the existing one? And I guess from what I'm hearing, it's a discussion of what is the scope of a new action being added. If it's just between the PLR and merge point, or between the new ingress and a new egress, then we have choices there. But if it's a global scope, we could amend the existing hop. So do we
No,
need?
not quite, Tarek. If I may, if it's
Yeah,
global scope, we have to amend all the substacks. I cannot construct any situation in which it makes sense to amend just the top substack, because then you don't remove it at the boundary. You don't remove the new information at the boundary of the pushed labels, but you remove it at the next point because it's not going to get copied further down. So it would be a really strange case to be modifying just one other one. We've been discussing the case of, do you need to modify all of them? We can have that discussed, and that needs to be discussed more on the list. I really don't like that, but I can't assert we don't. We should never do it. We need to discuss that on the list. But modifying just the top one produces just a mess. So that's why I didn't include that as an option in this. Also, having multiple different behaviors produces a mess. So we want to keep it simple, man, so the implementation's doing it right.
Okay, thank you.
This doesn't apply to select or end-to-end. Those are non-issues by the way they're defined. Okay, Loa,
Okay,
and then I'm going to have to leave probably.
Loa?
I thought Stuart was before me, but did he drop out?
I
Stuart's not on the list.
Oh, all right, I'll add myself back on.
Okay.
I'm not sure whether I am correct about maximum redundant trees requiring NFRR being sticky, but the fundamental reason for concern is that no further reroute in the presence of any failure is so fundamental to IP fast reroute that it makes me incredibly nervous if it's not sticky. And I need to go back and look at some work that we did, maybe 15 years ago or so, and remember what the specific cases were. But we often got into trouble if we tried to repair following on a repair, to the extent where the general consensus of the IP fast reroute community is that on a second failure you abandon all attempts at doing fast reroute.
I'd love to see a write-up which describes why, so we can, as a group, make that decision.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and think what we did nearly 20 years ago, I suppose, why we came to that conclusion. But it is absolutely fundamental to what we always do.
But it's not written down anywhere. I can't evaluate it.
I'll have to go back and look at some of the early work and see if we wrote it down. But you'll keep finding the term abandon all hope.
My memory, I mean, Stuart, I was there. My memory was that was the case of if you get a second failure while you're on the failure recovery path.
No,
And
it's if you get a
that
second
case I
failure.
remember.
No. The problem is that it's just too complicated to work out what all the strategies are and which ones crash. That the general consensus was that we would never even attempt it. Now it's
Okay,
possible that TILFA. It's possible that TILFA is a step forward, but I'll have to go look at that really early work and find out why we decided to do that. But abandon all hope was a standard thing that we did.
I remember the phrase. I really need to see something in writing at this point, because trying to say, well, 20 years ago we thought this was a case, really hard to evaluate, creating additional effort just on that when it's not in any of the RFCs.
I'll see if I can find out some. Remember what
And
some of those.
if you can't find it, if you can write up the case, I'm perfectly willing to evaluate it now without saying, well, but that wasn't in the RFC, if there's a clear description.
Right. All right. Anyway, that's where I got to. I'm not sure whether it applies to the case I mentioned, which
And
was.
as I said, if we agree, if NFFRR needs this, don't ever do that. Or if we define two actions, one NFFRR over recovery path and one never refuse to do FRR anywhere further in the path, those are specific actions which we can define as requiring pushing it on, even if the general behavior says, here's what you do. Because even if you're pushing that action into other things, you still have the problem that other actions which don't need to be pushed into every individual thing require this base behavior to preserve the semantics of hop by hop M&A substacks.
Right. Anyway, I'll do some more work on it.
Thank you.
Or
Loa?
maybe I'll remember.
Okay, so a couple of questions, smaller questions, I hope. So we have this. You have described consecutive copying of one network action up into the stack. How much will this cause the stack to grow? And if it does, is it a problem?
Well, it will cause the stack to grow less than if you take the entire stack you're adding and copy it into everything below it. And you still have to somehow, I mean, Matthew, somebody suggested the other alternative of putting a single action into the new substack that says go look for the next one. That is a viable alternative, and we should evaluate that, which does reduce the label growth. That's the one attraction of that alternative. It does, however, require that we dive down more into the label stack, but maybe that's necessary. So that is an alternative I hadn't considered and worth evaluating.
Okay.
And that would reduce the label stack growth problem.
So, in your mind, do we have the label stack growth problem in this context?
I believe we have the problem no matter what behavior we choose to use to resolve the fact that you need to meet the requirement that you only have to examine one hop by hop label, one hop by hop substack. If we want to change the base behavior to say you must examine all hop by hop substacks, that would be different, but I wasn't trying to change that base behavior that's in the draft we've adopted as a working group.
So the second question is that you have described a couple of things that needs to be captured in the M&A document. Do you have an idea about which document will be affected?
It's the M&A ISD document that Tony Lee is editing.
Okay. Nothing else, not framework, not requirements, not use cases?
I wasn't expecting. I believe that this behavior is an implication of what is already in the requirements and the framework. It's just we didn't put it into the ISD description document. And as long as it gets into the ISD description document, implementers will know they have to do it. I'm not worried about updating the requirements document.
If you say ISD description, what document are you talking about?
The one Tony's editing. What? I don't remember. I don't remember the draft names. The one that actually describes how we do in stack data.
Isn't that the JAG's document? Or
I was told the editorship had been handed to Tony.
Ah,
It started
okay.
as JAG's document.
Yeah, okay.
But I believe Tony did the last editing pass on it.
One correction. I
Yes?
did an editing pass on it, but I have handed editorship back
Oh,
because
I was misinformed. Sorry. Okay. The point is that's the draft that has to have this.
and yes, it's formerly known as draft JAGs.
Okay. Then I'm
But that has been
then I'm
accepted
in sync again. Yeah. Thank you.
and that is a working group document now. So
Yep.
Yeah. It's draft IETF-MPLS.
M&A header.
Yeah. That's the one that needs to be updated.
So, Joel, can I ask you to work with the co-authors on that document to make the updates?
Not until we have agreement on the list on what the update is.
I know, but I'm just.
I'm happy to work with the authors once we have agreed on what it has to say.
Okay, thank you. So I'm done.
Tony, you're on.
Yep. Tony's still in the queue.
Waiting for his button to let him in.
I'm beginning to hate Meet Echo, guys. I agree. We are not yet to the point where we have consensus. I have yet to hear anything that sounds like a concrete proposal for what the document should say differently.
Well, the first of these two bullets, for example, appears to be absolutely necessary and not subject to argument. And so and that needs to be said in the document. We need to agree on what has to be said about the second of these two bullets. And that needs to be discussed on the list, which is why I prefer list discussion to interim discussions.
Okay, well, I disagree that this needs to be said because I think it's already there, but that's okay.
I don't think it's there. I think it's implied by the requirements, but I don't think it actually says it. If it says it, I'm happy, but I couldn't find it. And I've got to run for another meeting.
Bye, Joel.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joel and Tony, on this. Next, we want to switch to the discussion from Jimmy.
Wait a minute. I had asked Stuart for his opinion also. Stuart, do you have anything more
On this?
Yeah.
I think we need to go and look in detail at the text that Tony says is there.
Okay. So you will be back and on the mailing list, I think.
And I think it depends on the case that Matthew had, which is whether you're bridging across something, doesn't it?
Okay.
Okay.
So Tarek, let's go ahead.
Hey, Noah, I need to switch off my hotspot. So are you able to click on the share slides button and you'll see the presentation from Jimmy? Let me make sure it is there. 1 second.
It should be there. I think Nick can do it.
No, let me. I think that we need to refresh.
I have uploaded the slide and I'm trying to share, but
Yeah, I am working on that. Give me a second. Okay.
the problem is that the slides don't show up. Let me.
Yeah. You need to drag them in.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I don't know which ones, so I added all.
Yeah, me too. I added
Can
them.
you try?
But
Yeah, can you try now, Nick? They should be there, but I don't know which one is it.
no. Yeah. Now they show up. Okay. Okay, I try this one here. I think it should work. Share. You should see something now.
See it. Yeah, we can see it.
Okay.
So,
Hi, can you hear me?
Tarek, are you going to drop off and come back? Or
So I can share. I mean,
okay, do that.
That works. Yeah.
Hello, should I begin with this slide?
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Please. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So here is some analysis about the limitations with M&A ISD. And the purpose is not to say ISD is not useful. It's just to show the possible limitations in the current design. And also with these limitations in mind, we may consider in some scenarios PSD will be needed. Okay, next page, please. So first is the limitation in the size of the ISD. Firstly, I'd like to remind people that the purpose of the ISD design is one of the purposes that to make the M&A information close to the top of the label stack so that the legacy devices can parse and process it. Actually, it's not just for the legacy devices. It can also help to make some of the M&A information readily accessible for all the network nodes along the path. But this also indicates that the size of the ISD should be relatively small, like for example, 3 LSEs or even less. This is based on some of the data we collected from the existing devices capability. Otherwise, if we have a bigger data for the M&A, it would need to be encapsulated as PSD, as putting it in ISD would make the purpose of the easily accessible for the legacy and for the other nodes not applicable. So we need some information about the legacy hardware's capability in the label stack parsing and also the processing. So far, we got some information about the legacy. The typical number is, if you have more information, more input about the data of the numbers, it'll be very helpful. Among this label stack depths, we also need to consider some of the labels. Like usually, we need 2 or more labels for the tunnels and for the service, etc. For segment routing, we would need more labels being used for the tunnels. With this, it leaves maybe 3 to 5 LSEs for the total length of the ISD. And if we consider the size of the ISD, it will include the MNA label and followed by a format B LSE. This is the minimal format for the NAS. And this leaves only 1 to 3 LSEs for additional opcodes and data. So this is
This is incorrect.
In addition, we also need to consider the scenario.
This slide is incorrect. As you can see, the length of the NASL
Which
field,
one?
the length of the ISD is not limited to 3 to 5 LSEs. Okay, you've got 4 bits. You could stick 15 more LSEs.
This is based on the second bullet. If we can
that doesn't make it a limitation because it's typical.
Readable to the legacy devices.
That doesn't make it a limitation because it's typical.
But if you have other numbers about the legacy hardware's capability, it can also give some input on this. I'm not saying the limitation based on the size of the NASL field.
Distributed through the IGP. That's not a limitation on ISD, that's a limitation on legacy hardware.
Yeah, but if we want to make the ISD applicable to the legacy hardware, this is a limitation we need to consider. Right?
Either, so that doesn't help.
Yeah, I mean, that is, I didn't say this is not a limitation to the PSD. I'm just saying if we want to make ISD to meet one of the purpose which is to make the legacy devices can parse it from label stack. This is something we need to consider. For the PSD, it may, we can have another analysis maybe if needed, but this is the analysis about ISD's limitation if we consider the legacy devices as an optional, as a possible target node or the node which need to read this information from the label stack. Yeah. Maybe we can continue, and when we finish, we can have a further discussion about every point in this. Sorry, I didn't finish the last one in the previous page. Yeah, the last one is we also need to consider if we need to encapsulate multiple ISDs into the label stack. This may have some requirement on the number of LCs the ingress node is capable to impose. So this is another thing we need to consider, which can bring some limitation to the size of the ISD. Can be supported by the ingress node. Okay, next page, please. The second aspect about the limitation is in the encoding. As we can see in this picture, actually we have the different opcodes with different formats, and different LC formats are defined in this document. So far, the action flags and the data are carried in separate opcodes. We have defined the opcode 3 for flags with action ancillary data, but it has been removed from the document due to some previous discussion. Then for the applications which need both the flag and data, the encoding will be not quite efficient. We will need the separate opcodes for the flag and for the data, respectively. And if we consider the format of a specific opcode, it will be constrained by the positions of the S bit and also the other fields defined in the some of these RC formats. With this, we will need to consider some design with the data field of the opcode. For example, is the variable length data allowed for one specific opcode, or do we need to introduce multiple opcodes for one application when there needs different lengths? And
Yes,
we
variable
can
length is supported because
can
you
we
have an NAL field there that tells you how long the ancillary data is.
yeah, this is one option, but I think there will be some
It's what we agreed to.
limitations we introduce. For one specific opcode, can we introduce a different data length, or is it like a fixed?
An opcode can use the NAL field to describe how much ancillary data is attached. What it wants to do is up to the definition of the opcode.
Okay. So the second question is, can we support TLV formats in one opcode, or we just need, or we only supported like a fixed format?
You can do whatever
Hey,
you want
Jimmy,
inside your
we have.
ancillary data.
Oh, sorry, Tony. One second, Tony. I think that, yeah, I mean, Jimmy is trying to ask questions on the proposal, so I appreciate Tony coming in and answering the questions. But we have Greg also on the queue. I want to give him a chance to speak. He's raising his hand. And do you want and basically asking questions at any time, Jimmy, or I guess you're asking questions, so
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, it's valuable that
Yeah,
the
Yeah,
proposal.
I think. Yeah, we can discuss on every page. It'd be.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with Tony, and I'm not really share their idea that ISD M&A must be designed to work on any existing platform. So it should be safe to deploy ISD M&A on existing platform. So we need to have possibly extension or use extensions that already exist in IGP and BGP that were introduced for similar situation with the entropy label. But I think that it's up to developers to decide what options in ISD M&A they want to support and on what platform. So I think that the main question that raised or concern expressed is not really there. So it's not technical. It's business decision what you support. So thank you.
You're talking about the first page, the size, right?
Yeah, I believe that the whole motivation of this saying that ISD M&A must be applicable on all existing platforms deployed, regardless of their physical computational capabilities, is not technical. This is not a technical concern. So it's a business decision. And I apologize for my dog barking on me. Not on me, really, but barking. Okay, so
yeah, actually,
I understand that we have to leave for ISD with certain inconveniences, as you pointed out, that make this data space somewhat awkward. But again, if you look at, for example, a proposal on supporting IAM DEX as Instack data M&A, it might be not pretty, but it will work. So again,
yeah,
I think that
I agree that
we need to discuss the technical issues not the things that we like or don't like. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think I agree we need to discuss the technical issues, but we also need to consider the reality of the network if we want to make this mechanism really applicable and really can be deployed in the brownfield network. We also need to consider the limitation or capability of the existing hardwares. This is something I think we have been considered in the past, right?
I agree with you that we might keep
For example,
in mind.
if we have a really huge ISD, sorry, maybe some delay here.
Okay, so there is old joke, medical joke. The guy comes to the doctor and tells him.
Are you talking?
Yes, I think I'm talking. Guy comes to the doctor and says, "Doctor, I press this. Everything hurts." Doctor looks at him, says, "You have a broken finger." Okay, so if a network is limited capacity, then it should not use ISD-MNA. And vendors and implementers must understand their implication of introducing ISD-MNA in their existing networks. So, and work with operators on how to overcome that. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, Jimmy, we don't have anyone else in the queue, so you can continue, I guess. Hello? Can you hear me, Jimmy? Hello? Anyone can hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Oh, okay. Great.
So
is this the last slide, Nick, for Jimmy,
now?
or
there are like at least 3 or 4 more slides.
Hi, Tariq. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. Sorry, I think I reconnected. So this is about the format. The second bullet is, do we allow the
Okay, Jimmy was about to ask whether TLV's format is supported in the opcode. And the answer is that's completely up to the opcode. The action gets to define what its ancillary data is like. And it may be TLV formatted. It could be an MIT TICO macro. It could be a Lisp S expression. We really don't care. You've got 30 bits of opaque data. Do whatever you like. Have fun.
Hi, can you hear me again?
yeah,
my point about this. Sorry,
okay.
the network is really bad here.
Feel free to manage. I was going to say that Tony had tried to answer your question, but I'll just go on silent now.
Okay. The point is, if we introduce the TLV format for the data field of the opcode, we need to deal with the different LSE formats and also the S bit which is in the middle of the data field. And with the TLV, it will introduce some difficulty for different combination of the TLVs. You will need to put the data at different position, and then you also need to consider not to conflict with the S bit. right? This is something we need to consider in addition to the previous in other data packet or the data plane extensions. This is some additional considerations are needed. And the third bullet is if we want to introduce some application data which is already have a existing format defined and independent from the transport data plane, like for MPLS and for the IPv6, they want the consistent data format. Can we accommodate this into a specific opcode in the ISD because of this, like the position of the aspect and other fields introduced in the different RSC formats. So this is something I think will be a little bit difficult for the M&A ISD encoding. Okay, maybe we can continue to
I don't
next
understand
page.
the question. Could you say a bit more about that? I thought I heard you say you were trying to put an IPv6 header inside of ISD.
Yes.
No. I'm saying we have a specific application for if we want to use the IOM. We have an IOM data format already defined as a independent encapsulation, which was designed to be applicable to different data transport, like all the network data plane, like the IPv6 or MPLS. If we want to be consistent with that data format, that means we need to accommodate the existing data into the ISD, but there will be some difficulty when we need to consider the ASPIT and other flags or the fields already defined in the RSE.
Yeah, if I may,
Right.
yes, but I again look at it as nice to have and not something that must to have. And that's a result of IPPM working group defining its format without consideration of data plane issues. On the other hand, we have mechanisms in IP and MPLS doesn't use IP encoding. One of the examples is ICMP, ping. So in MPLS decided to implement this functionality differently, and actually there are some things that were developed, some functions that were developed for MPLS LSP ping, and they don't exist in IPv6, for example, right? So although it might be beneficial to have commonality of encoding, it's not mandatory. So again, I don't see it being a hard requirement saying that in MPLS we must use whatever encoding being done for IPv6. It's different data plane. It has different.
I'm not saying to.
It has different constraints, and we must make the best out of what we have.
Yeah, that means additional effort is needed because that the application may not be designed for IPv6. It is designed for a unified application for different data plane, right?
Okay, G, are you talking about specific case or are you talking about some abstract, unknown yet application?
I think IOM and maybe .NET will be something we can consider as applications which is being worked on in a specific working group, but they may want to
Okay.
have a unified encapsulation for different data plane.
Okay, for DetNet, can we put it on the back burner and talk about it next week? Because I will be presenting DetNet and its view, because we are discussing in the DetNet with chairs.
Okay. Okay, and this is not only about the DetNet and IOM. I just use them as examples. Like different working groups are working on different maybe data plane mechanisms, and they're not aware of the difference between IPv6 MPLS or IPv4 even. So if we want to reuse the existing work, or we want to introduce or design a specific data plane for MPLS, that is something we need to consider. Okay. I think then we come to the processing limitations. This is about something we discussed maybe in the previous 1 or 2 weeks. About whether we can change some of the data in the MNA ISD. Actually, I think the draft already mentioned that to avoid the impact to the traffic flow forwarding or the balancing, the first 20 bits at the previous label field of every LC in the ISD must not be changed. So this leaves a very small room for the writable data in the different LC formats. Like for the LC format B, all the data are not allowed to be changed. For the format C, there are 7 bits left, and for format D, there's 11 bits. And another processing limitation is something we discussed last. If we want to modify the LCs, which are not at the top of the label stack, this require a new behavior to the MPLS implementation. We need to investigate the availability and the performance of the hardwares. NFFR is just one typical example here, but I think we already have some different opinions on whether it requires to change the next hop label ISD, or just need to change the topmost one. And if in case we need to change the next and all the ISDs in the label stack, when there are multiple copies of the ISDs, if a node is only able to reach some of these ISDs, it will be out of sync in the replicated ISD data, and this may be a not expected result of the packet forwarding. Okay, I think this has been discussed recently, and just here it just documents this as one possible limitation in the ISD processing. And for some of the use cases, this may not be required, but as a solution, we need to consider these limitations. Okay, next page. So here are some conclusions. So first, we think ISD use for devices to support some of the M&A functionalities, especially it is more friendly to some legacy devices, as we discussed before, because it's easy to reach in the packet. And we also need to acknowledge or understand the limitations with M&A ISD, which may impact some of the applications with ISD, and in some use cases, they may be not that applicable with ISD, but maybe PSD is more suitable for this kind of applications. Like in the limitations of the data, or in the limitation of the data data size or the encoding or the processing. We hope these limitations can be understood by the MPLS working group participants and documented in the suitable document in the working group. And for some of the applications which require to break these limitations, like the data size or encoding or processing, PSD will be needed. Like for the IOM cases, in some modes, the data size and the encoding would require to maybe to exceed the limitation with the ISD. And the DetNet is a similar case. No further fast reroute requires some specific data processing, which brings some difficulty to the ISD processing. Right. Okay. Next page. Okay, so this is to answer the questions of the working group chairs. For the first one, we think the IOM and DetNet are two possible use cases which will need a PSD due to the data size limitation. And in this presentation, we didn't talk about the complexity of the PSD or the ISD. It's just about the capability and the limitations with the ISD design. And for the as data stack depth increase, IOM would increase the data stack depth as the path packages travel along the path. And for the fourth question is, we think that for some of the limitations with the ISD, PSOD will be a needed solution. Regarding the compatibility issue with the PSD, previously we discussed the possible order between the PSD and other post-stack data, post-stack information. I guess we have reached some consensus that the PSD will be the immediately following the bottom label, and other information will follow the post-stack data. So that will be a resolution to this compatibility issue. Okay, I think that will be all of the slides. Thank you.
Greg?
Greg, you're
Yeah, thank you. I think that I understand their experience. So the frustration Tony has, because switching the microphone, it very time lag. Okay, so again, I would like not to go into discussion of M&A interaction with the DetNet, because I don't find there in this presentation any technical cases that indicate that DetNet would benefit from PSD. And I can say that from our analysis that we're doing in the DetNet group, it's quite opposite. Actually, PSD is not a good case for DetNet. Secondly, on amount of data, yes, in case of in situ OEM, it defined the mode that adds operational state and information in a packet. So some environments might decide to use it, but I think that it would be unwise to do it in MPLS network. And definitely it's absolutely prohibitive behavior in DetNet, where the resources for the data traffic must be planned ahead. So I think that direct export is a reasonable option for MPLS data plane to use to get this on-path information. And that can be done in ISD. We already have a proposal for that. So with everything else, I don't see a lot of concerns. Thank you.
So I'd like to point out that the legacy implementations that have difficulty dealing with arbitrarily large ISD are going to have even more issues dealing with PSD. A typical legacy implementation is only going to be able to see some way into the top of the label stack, say 64 bytes. And if it can only see 64 bytes of label stack, there's no way it's going to also be able to see PSD. So PSD is not a solution. Thank you.
Yeah, with PSD, I think the benefit is the legacy devices does not need to be aware of this PSD data, and right. But with the ISD, there's a possibility is it understand the M&A label and they want to try to pass the ISD, but they exceed the capability of the hardware, and that is something we don't want to see in the network.
Well, if the legacy nodes don't process it, then your action didn't get processed hop by hop. That would seem to be a semantic problem. If you're doing IOAM and only the non-legacy nodes process it, are you going to get useful data? I'll take that as a no.
But if we consider some application, yeah, if we consider one application is cannot be parsed by legacy node with either ISD or PSD, I'm not sure whether this is still we want to use ISD to carry this information or not. So this is a limitation with ISD. I'm not saying the PSD is a solution to the legacy device, just to say that if we want the legacy device to pass ISD, we need to consider the limitations.
I agree. ISD is limited. Legacy devices are limited, but PSD doesn't help.
PSD is not to solve the legacy device capability issue, right?
Correct, which was the thesis
If
of
we
your
consider the
entire talk.
PSD, the legacy device cannot support, yeah, that means if we consider the legacy device is not our target, we can revisit whether it's deserve to be put in the label stack or it is more applicable to as a PSD in
As
the
we've
packet.
said many times,
That is
legacy
something we can.
been in the network for 20 years, and they're not going anywhere. And if we don't support them, you got no chance of deploying M&A.
I'm not saying about the M&A. I'm talking about a specific application. If due to the limitation of the hardware in the legacy node, it cannot be parsed in either ISD or PSD. Whether we still want to put it in the ISD, or we just with some of the limitations as we discussed in the slides, or we just use a more extensible mechanism
We can
for
put
this
it.
kind of applications.
We put actions in ISD and live with limitations, or we can put it in PSD and it won't operate with legacy devices at all.
I have a similar question to what Tony is trying to highlight. If I cannot, if there is a concern with ISD being present in the stack and the stack growing, then how is this concern appeased by putting it in the PSD and assuming I can read, I can read after the stack? So in both cases, you will have to process and read the data wherever you place it. So if a node if a transit node cannot process a huge stack, it cannot also
for
process
the legacy device, as you
yeah. Okay, it's just yeah. Maybe you can yeah. I'm not sure about those devices.
are you still talking? I cannot hear you.
Oh, okay, so there are I wasn't following the specific device behavior, so I'll have to go back and uh, and read through your slide. No problem. Thanks.
Yeah, maybe I can quickly answer your question. I mean that if we know that for a specific application, the legacy nodes cannot parse it or cannot process it, regardless whether it is in ISD or PSD. So this application will only be understood and processed by the new hardware, right? Then we need to consider whether it is beneficial to put it in ISD or whether it is better to put it in the PSD. So we don't need to consider the support for the legacy hardware as part of our consideration, because no matter which place it is put in the packet, the legacy hardware cannot process it. So for this kind of applications, we need to consider
Sorry,
which approach will be more
what
suitable.
you mean? Sorry, I'm interrupting. Apologize. Is it legacy devices that you're saying, or Lex device? I couldn't.
Maybe I can write down in the notes about. It's not clear.
I think you're saying legacy devices. That's what I'm asking. Is it legacy devices that you're talking about?
I mean, I'm talking about an application which cannot be supported by legacy device, no matter it's carried in ISD or PSD. For this kind of application, when we consider the suitable place for this data, we don't need to consider whether it is easily accessible to the legacy devices, right? Because they cannot pass it or they cannot process it. This is something I want to point out.
Okay, thank you.
And if we really want some application to be supported by the legacy device, we need to consider their limitations, right?
Okay, I have a question because you said so now. If it's a legacy device, then how do you assume it supports M&A? It's a legacy device. That it means it doesn't support M&A, or it supports M&A, or it may support M&A.
It supports M&A, but it may not. It may support M&A, but it has some limitation in its capability, like the
I think the
depth of the
definition
label
of
stack,
legacy
right?
is confusing. Definition of legacy device is confusing to me. Okay, you mean a
legacy
limited hardware device? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, I
Right.
still have the same point. I mean, if it's a limited hardware, then how is it helping putting the metadata after the stack? If it is limited hardware, then it will not be able to process the data after the stack.
Yeah, so it is not able to process it, no matter it is in ISD or PSD. In this case, we need to consider what is the benefit of putting it in ISD and what is the benefit of putting it in PSD, because we don't. If the target node will not be the legacy hardware nodes, right? For this kind of applications, we need to consider which place is more suitable, not just to easier to be accessed in the packet, right?
I see. Okay, thank you. Loa, you're
I'm kind of, I may be a little bit confused, but I think what I hear Yi saying is that if you have a limited hardware and you enable M&A on it, then there are cases that you probably not will be able to process. And it will be made worse if you actually increase the label stack out of what the specific device has as a maximum label depth. So trying to find out kind of a reasonable size that we can increase the label stack before we actually put the data in the PSD, fully knowing that it will not be processed anyway, but it will not disrupt other operations on the label stack for the legacy devices. I think D is somewhere in that context.
Right. All right.
Okay. I don't consider that as a limitation of ISD then, right? Or is it a limitation of ISD in this case for legacy devices? Because the title of your presentation is limitations to ISD. It's limitations of the device in the way I can hear it. Okay. Loa, Nick, I think we are close to the end of our meeting. I'm not sure if Jimmy still has anything else to add. Are you able to hear me? Anyone?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, Loa, yeah. Go ahead, please.
So if we are closing the meeting, I would like the shares, including Stuart, to stay so we can coordinate a little bit before we shut the meeting.
I will, on this point, Loa, I think we don't want to be recording the discussions. Because
okay.
So I'm scheduling that.
And it would disappear on us. It would disappear on us. So we have to go to a separate meeting.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It will come in a minute. I'm scheduling it now.
Okay, good. That was what I was going to ask about. Send it out.
I will. Thank you. Okay, I just sent it out. I will start it now so we can jump onto WebEx. It should have started. So please join me there. And thanks everyone who is still on the call. And we'll see you next time in the M&A interim meetings that we have, regular ones. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.